Welcome, everyone. Teachings on the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. Introduction on August 16th, 2023, and then to be followed this Saturday, August 19th, with a day of practice down in Portland, also on Zoom. The Four Foundations of Mindfulness, sometimes translated as the Four Applications of Mindfulness, are one of basically two meditation manuals in the original suttas. So Shakyamuni Buddha taught for about 45 years. And there are thousands of sutras, some of which are a paragraph long. So he would travel around, he would meet people, have conversations, and some of that conversation would be remembered and eventually written down. Sometimes he would be invited for a meal, and then the family that was there would get some little teaching, and that would become a sutra. So some of them are a paragraph long, some of them are a page long. There's probably 40,000 of them. So 40,000 interactions between Shakyamuni Buddha and whoever he was speaking to. Two of those sutras were lengthy, more or less complete meditation manuals. One of them was the Satipatthana, or the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. The other one was the Anapanasati, which is mindfulness of breathing. And both of them use the Four Foundations of Mindfulness as the framework. There's a lot of lists in Buddhism, but this list is pretty easy. The four foundations are just everything we experience. The first foundation is the body and the sensations that the body receives. The second foundation is how we feel about that sensation that we experience. There's only three feelings in the second foundation: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So that's the second foundation. The third foundation is the mind and all of its contents. So thoughts, emotions, memories, images, impulses, the stories that we construct with our mind. And then the fourth foundation is just how those things interact. So even the first foundation, sensing, we're interacting with the world of phenomena. And of course, how we feel about those interactions and the mind constructions that follow how we feel influence what we perceive. The Four Foundations of Mindfulness is a way of clearly experiencing those sensations, feelings, and thoughts. And that's shamatha, or calm abiding, the ability to be present in sensations, feelings, and thoughts. When we can be present in our experience, then we begin to see clearly what's arising, what the nature of it is, how it interacts with other experiences and with phenomena. And so that calm abiding and clear seeing, or shamatha vipashyana, is the actual practice, and we apply it to the four applications of mindfulness. So in a way, this whole elaborate, framework and all the different ways that the different Buddhist traditions have uh, cultivated and practiced and transmitted those teachings come back to the basic practice of being present in experience, seeing clearly what's arising. The discomfort or struggle we have in our lives, we generally think or see our troubles as caused by something out in the world, something external. The weather's not good. Somebody says something we don't like. Something happens that confuses us. We have unpleasant feelings, or even if the feelings are pleasant, something happens we do like, then we can run into dissatisfaction when the conditions that we found pleasant start to fade. And what we thought we would have was reliable begins to change. And we often think, even if we get a little clearer that the suffering is coming from ourselves, that our internal perceptions and feelings and thoughts have something to do with our dissatisfaction, we tend to blame it on the unpleasant feelings or the craving that comes out of pleasant feelings or the jealousy we have towards something we perceive in someone else's life, or the pride we have and feel we aren't being treated right. So we tend to say that our suffering is caused by these emotions. But the Dharma teaches that the actual cause of the suffering, the emotions do cause that suffering, but the cause of those emotions is confusion. Greed and hatred, jealousy and pride don't just come out of nowhere. They arise from our confusion, not knowing how things are. To see clearly how things are, insight practice, to know the true nature of experience and phenomena, our mind has to be at least somewhat stable. We have to be present for our experience, not be taken in by pleasant or unpleasant feelings, not be confused by our own thoughts and emotions and memories, not compelled by our impulses to do things that cause ourselves and others difficulty. We have to interrupt the confusion and the emotional reactions long enough to actually examine what's arising. Shamatha is usually translated as calm abiding. From the practice standpoint, we could call it resting, when we can rest in experience and not react, and not get taken in or confused, not compelled to avoid experience or try to grasp at it. We can rest in our sensations and feelings and thoughts as they come and go. So we could call shamatha resting. We could call insight or vipashyana, clear seeing, we could call that recognizing. So we call it insight practice, but it's not done with the eyes. And usually in the instructions, we're told to look look at a thought, look at a feeling. But say you're walking down the street and an old friend comes walking toward you. You recognize that old friend. You don't think, oh, here comes someone. They're about 5 feet tall. Oh, look, they have red hair. I wonder who I know who has red hair. Oh, look, they're wearing, fancy shoes. I wonder who I know that might be wearing fancy shoes. We don't think, we don't get drawn into our own confused or constructed perception and all the questions that come out of that. We look at that old friend, we see their face, and we recognize them. We know for certain who that is. We don't have to use inference or deduction or any kind of analysis. So ideally, vipashyana or insight practice is that kind of looking fresh, just looking up and recognizing the nature of something that has always been there and has always been that way. In the Kagyu tradition, all of the Tibetan traditions of Buddhism, but especially the Kagyu, the ultimate intention and practice is to achieve Mahamudra. Maha means big, and mudra means sign or seal. So it's the big or the great seal, the great characteristic of everything. And there's many ways to talk about it. And for every one of those ways to talk about it, there's numerous ways of getting sidetracked and confused. So maybe better not to talk too much about Mahamudra. But since it's the ultimate goal of all the practices, it's good to have some sense of where the practices lead to that, where the practices fit together. I was taught by Ken MacLeod, and it's referred to in quite a few of the Mahamudra manuals, using different language, little different descriptions, but basically three paths to Mahamudra. There's the Sutra Mahamudra, and there's Tantra Mahamudra, and there's Essential Mahamudra. So Tantra Mahamudra or Vajrayana Mahamudra includes things like devotion, a yidam practice, visualization, internal yogas of Naropa or Nigama, different kinds of energy transformation practices. So that's a difficult path and one that requires close guidance. All of these are impossible to reach Mahamudra by reading a book or listening to podcasts, but the Vajrayana especially is complex, involves some energy transformation practices that are quite tricky. The Sutra Mahamudra is in the shortest description, I think. Shamatha and vipashyana perfectly united. So practiced, cultivated, familiarized, and united is Mahamudra. So when you can rest in experience, recognize the true nature of everything that's happening. You can rest in the recognizing, and you can recognize while resting, then there's nothing else to do. And then there's Essential Mahamudra or Pith Mahamudra, which is not necessarily taught in, first you learn calm abiding, and then you do clear seeing, and then you do these other practices, and kind of step-by-step progression. Pith Mahamudra is to get direct pointing out instructions as to the nature of your experience and all phenomena. So in practice, the retreats and teachings and conversations I've had with teachers, there's often those three different paths to Mahamudra are not really three different routes, like three different roads. It's almost always some mixture of those. But I think it's helpful to understand when you're doing yidam practice, or when you're doing calm abiding practice, or when you're reflecting on the four thoughts that turn the mind. All of those are fitting into a comprehensive set of practices that ultimately have the same goal. Resting in experience, calm abiding, or shamatha, will calm down our emotional and mental reactions. Peace and stillness and some clarity, some sharp perception of what's actually happening are the happy side effects. And as Lama Michael Conklin taught, I think been looking over his notes from the insight retreats that I attended. And in one of them, he said, shamatha, it's frustrating when you can't do it, and it's dangerous when you can. Because when you find that still, peaceful, calm mind, it is so peaceful and so enjoyable that for many of us, our practice just stops right there. We are happy to sit in peace and quiet and to notice blissful, sights, sounds, sensations. Calm abiding is absolutely necessary to do insight practice effectively, but it's not sufficient. So this is where the teaching and practice of calm abiding first. Michael also talked about, he quoted Adu Rinpoche, who said that shamatha was like calming down the water, say in a river or a lake. Shamatha is calming of the water. So that you see the reflection of the moon clearly in the water. Vipashyana, or insight, is recognizing that the moon in the water is a reflection. It's not the actual thing. It's the appearance of the moon in the water. It's not the real moon. And Mahamudra is seeing the actual moon. So I know many of you have been practicing shamatha and vipashyana for years. Others have been practicing not too long. But regardless of the depth of your experience, if you're like me, you can always use another teaching and another kind of angle on how to approach the practice. And another thing is I've been preparing for this class is to look through, there's many teachings on how to practice calm abiding. How do you deal with dullness? How do you deal with a distracted or busy mind? Many ways of working with those hindrances, obstacles. But I started to notice that almost all of the in-depth teachings said something that was maybe a little surprising, but the main obstacle to shamatha, to calm abiding, to being able to be resting, present in experience as it arises, isn't a technical or technique kind of thing. It's not enough motivation, not enough clarity about motivation. That's what prevents calm abiding. And so that's why I sent out a handout on the four thoughts that turn the mind. So my introductory talk has already covered those. And as you look at different texts and listen to different teachers, those four thoughts that turn the mind or four reminders will be hidden in, I would say, most, if not all, of the teachings. The faults of samsara, the futility of samsara, going around in circles of confusion and reactivity and dissatisfaction. That's one of the reminders. The inevitability of karma is another one. Our intentions and our views and our actions evolve into our experience. Our experience, as it arises, is the sum total of our views and our actions and our intentions from the beginning, from now into the beginningless past. I was visiting family in the Midwest last weekend. And when I went to the Chicago airport to come home, there was a driving rainstorm. Could hardly drive to the airport. When I got to the airport, I looked at the departures board, and just one cancellation after another. All the planes were being canceled, hundreds of them. And people were beginning to mill around in the terminals. People lost their connecting flights. People lost their hotel rooms. People lost their job interviews. The repercussions of all those canceled flights, just on and on. So that's the phenomenal world, right? We don't have much control over the weather, the flights, things like that, the computer systems, etc. But it was very clear as I looked around the terminal that people's reactions were very different. Some people were collapsed on the chairs and then the floors as the people stacked up, and there were not enough chairs for people. Some people were crying, some people were yelling, some people were running around helping strangers find something or figure something out. So everybody's reaction to what happened depended very much on their own perception, their own intention, and the abilities and qualities that their mind had based on their past experience and actions. So that's the inevitability of karma. It evolves into our experience. Our experience is nothing but the way we see things, our intentions, the way we respond to things. The third reminder is the truth of impermanence. Shakyamuni said, of all the animals in the jungle, the elephant's footprint is the biggest. He said, of all the truths and meditations, impermanence is the biggest. If we could actually see that everything, internal and external, is impermanent, we wouldn't have to do anything else. But this is one of the bases of our confusion that causes emotional reactions. We do not see that everything is impermanent, that everything depends on causes and conditions which are constantly changing. And that the unreliability of our internal and external phenomena leads to our confusion. If we were going for pure essence Mahamudra, Pith Mahamudra, I could say something like, rest in whatever arises, see its actual nature, it's impermanent, let go. Nothing else to do. We could save ourselves a couple hours tonight and 7 hours on Saturday if you would just do that. Rest, recognizing your experience, it's all impermanent, let go. And I don't know how many times Ken and Michael and Lama Lekshe and all the other teachers I've practiced with have told me that very simple thing in so many words, and I'm still working on it. So that brings us to the fourth reminder, precious human life. We have opportunities and resources and the traditional teachings make lists of those so that you can confirm it in your own experience. But the upshot is that we have everything we need. We have our senses more or less intact. Our mind is more or less stable and clear. We have the teachings and the teachers and a community to practice with. But because time is always changing, time is always short, these resources and opportunities won't be here forever. And so that's why we turn to the Dharma. It's going to put a link to the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayers in the chat, but it will not let me put anything in the chat. Oh, maybe it will. One of the conditions I'm bound by at the moment is this technology. I'm going to try to put it there. And if you can see it, well, there it is, I think. And if you can't, not to worry, because I have it printed in front of me, and a few other people will be able to see it. The four reminders, or four thoughts that turn the mind, turn our mind to the Dharma. And so we always begin practice taking refuge in awareness and compassion for the sake of all beings. Remembering that little bit about the main obstacle to shamatha and therefore to vipashyana being unclear or improper motivation. So the refuge prayers that Bokar Rinpoche offered to his students. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Sangha. Through the merit of generosity and other virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Sangha. Through the merit of generosity and other virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Sangha. By the merit of generosity and other virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May we be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May we never be separated from true happiness, which is free from suffering. May we abide in great equanimity, free from the partiality of attachment and aversion. Another teaching that we'll go over in more depth on Saturday when we have more time is another basic one that when I have my act together, I never go a day without taking a look at the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Somewhat simple on the surface, but they were the first teaching that Shakyamuni gave. And whenever people asked him, what's the one thing I really need to understand and practice, he would say the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So tonight, I just want to say that the Four Noble Truths are that dissatisfaction arises. You can call it suffering, sorrow, stress, struggle, discontent, whatever you want. Dukkha is the Sanskrit word, and it basically means dissatisfaction, ranging from stubbing a toe, so the physical pain, to existential angst and confusion and all the reactivity that comes out of it. The second noble truth is that the cause of dissatisfaction, it says it's craving. Tanha means thirst, the kind of thirst when you drink salt water, you just get thirstier. It's kind of endless thirst. But craving is kind of symbol or a summary of all the kleshas or conflicting emotions. So craving, aversion, jealousy, pride. There are longer lists, but those are the main four. And the root of those, of craving and aversion and jealousy and pride, is confusion, not knowing how things are. The cessation of suffering comes by letting go of the causes. And the path to the cessation of dissatisfaction is the Eightfold Path. So the Eightfold Path includes right speech and right action and right livelihood, right effort. So about half the path is action, words and actions, ethics. It's half that path is put under the category of ethics. And then there's wisdom, which is right view and right intention, which we've already kind of glanced at. It's knowing the Four Noble Truths, knowing that things are impermanent, dependent on causes and conditions, unreliable, knowing the truth of karma. Those are all right view. And right intention is to turn from clinging and ill will and harming and things that cause suffering, and instead making our intention generosity, patience, ethical action. And that leaves two more in the Eightfold Path, which are mindfulness and attention. So that's meditation itself. Of the Eightfold Path, only two of them are actually meditation. Right attention is samadhi, so unreactive. It's close to calm abiding. You could say calm abiding ultimately becomes samadhi, which is unified, unreactive, steady attention in what arises. Sometimes translated as concentration, but it's not concentration like focusing on the breath or focusing on something. It is the stable, unreactive, clear attention itself, no matter what you're paying attention to. And the other piece of meditation is sati, or mindfulness. So satipatthana, mindfulness of the four foundations. Four Foundations of Mindfulness is satipatthana. So sometimes the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the Four Reminders and all of those pieces seem like too simple, or they seem irrelevant to the practice at hand. How are we going to do insight practice? How are we going to do calm abiding? Why are we talking about these other things? But aside from the fact that you can't have insight without calm abiding, and you can't have calm abiding without proper motivation, right view and right intention are the first two of the Eightfold Path. And so we keep coming back to those, whether we're doing yidam practice or meditation practice or reflection of any kind. We keep coming back to the basics. If we're clear about where we need to go, and we have the intention to go there, then we will figure out our Buddha nature, our inherent capacity for knowing and responding to whatever arises. Our Buddha nature will carry us on the path. Even if we train and look at maps, of which there are lots of maps of the paths, but even if we study those and understand them, have pictures of them in our mind, unexpected things will happen, and some of those are internal and some are external. And so in the process of getting home from Chicago, instead of flying to Seattle, I flew to San Francisco first. So I didn't want to go to San Francisco. Sometimes I do, but I wanted to come to Seattle. But unexpectedly, San Francisco was on the way. So it's kind of like that. When we sit down to rest our attention in experience as it arises, our mind will sink into dullness and we'll lose awareness of what's arising inside and outside. Our mind will get distracted and go off into busyness, thinking or wanting or making efforts that just make things more difficult. And so again, we can learn many techniques, and everybody needs to learn or familiarize or master different techniques because we have different proclivities and different obstacles. But with shamatha practice, if we know that we want to rest in our experience as it arises, just as it arises, and that the calm in calm abiding doesn't come from shutting off our thoughts and emotions. It comes from not reacting to them. So if my back hurts or my knee hurts, I can rest in the experience of that aching or that heat or whatever it is, the sensation. The first foundation of mindfulness is sensation. So let's rest in the first foundation of mindfulness. As you sit in your body, notice the sensations, physical sensations. Notice the sounds. Notice the sights. Maybe there's also some odor or some flavor in your mouth. We have a physical body and it has 5 senses: hearing, seeing, smelling, touching, tasting. Can you rest in your physical senses? As they arise, persist a little while, then fade away. Of course, thoughts and feelings come up, but just disregard those. Rest your attention in your physical senses. You can use the breath, the sensations of breathing, to return to. Classic has a lot of advantages, one of which is that it's right back into the first foundation of mindfulness, the physical sensations of breathing. But we can also rest our attention on a visual object. We can rest our attention on sounds as they come and go. Those also are physical sensations, and so they're part of the first foundation of mindfulness. One of the things that comes out of proper motivation is faith. Do we have the faith to sit in our physical sensations as they arise and just be in those without arranging anything, without figuring anything out, without thinking about our sensations, but just resting in touch, sight, sound. So the resting quality, resting in whatever we're sensing, that's shamatha. Recognizing a discomfort in the knee, warmth on the skin, the sound of a fly buzzing around the room. The recognizing is vipashyana. We often have difficulty with distraction, busy mind, planning, etc. The best, most reliable way I know of to be free of that is to return to the sensing of the body. Don't do anything with thoughts or feelings. Just return to the sensing of the body, sight, sound, touch. So the first foundation of mindfulness is the body and its physical senses. The second foundation is Vedana. Often, that's Sanskrit, Vedana. It's often translated as feelings or feeling sensations or feeling tone. It's not emotions. It's not emotional feelings. Vedana is, there's only three of them: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So find a physical sensation in your body And as soon as you make contact with that sensation, there will arise a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neither pleasant nor unpleasant. That's the second foundation of mindfulness. Whenever there is sensation, sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, immediately a feeling tone arises, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The reason we want to rest in recognizing pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral is because pleasant turns into wanting, turns into craving, turns into grasping. Unpleasant turns into aversion and rejecting, pushing away. An awful lot of our sensations, the feeling that immediately rises is just neutral, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, or not very pleasant or unpleasant. So it doesn't matter, right? The problem there is it turns into indifference and then ignoring. So return to the body and its physical sensing and see if you can rest in the feelings of pleasantness and unpleasantness and neutrality as they arise. Notice this sensation's pleasant, that sensation's unpleasant. This one is just there. It's neutral. The capacity to feel a sensation and then to feel a pleasant or unpleasant feeling come out of that. That's the shamatha. The recognition, oh, this is tingling in my leg. That's an unpleasant feeling. That recognition of what's arising, that's the vipashyana. In the Four Foundations of Mindfulness Sutra, the body, practices of the body, the first foundation is kaya, or body. And so we have just looked at the body itself and the physical sensing that the body does. But the sutra also talks about the mindfulness of the body, regardless of what position it's in, standing, sitting, lying down, moving, also talks about mindfulness in all activities. So we practice on the cushion because otherwise our activities and reactions and so many perceptions happening, and it gets very hard to rest or recognize the nature of what's actually happening. We're focused and bent on making something happen. But the cushion practice is so that you can bring that mindfulness into whatever position the body is in and whatever activity the body is in. So let's take a 10-minute break. And as your body changes position and you engage in a couple activities, see if you can continue to rest in the physical sensations of the body, which not just touch sensations, but sights, sounds, tastes. If you get some tea or something like that, notice the physical sensations, and then notice feelings of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings that arise immediately upon each sensation. So that we say we'll take a 10-minute break, but it's just 10 minutes of practice, mindfulness of the body. We'll come back at 7:40. Thank you, everyone. So I think the only difference between cushion practice and daily practice as Ken would say, meditation is practice without activity, and daily life is practice with activity. If these four foundations encompass all of experience, then the first foundation is the body and its sensing anything. In fact, in Buddhism, we have the five senses, but the sixth sense is the mind. So even things that come out of the mind or come to the mind, as the case may be, are sensing in a way. So let your body settle onto the cushion again. Feel your weight resting on the cushion. Relax and breathe. Simply feel the sensations and movements of breathing. If you get distracted, or if your mind becomes dull, just return and rest in the breathing, sensing body again. Shamatha is both undistracted and at ease. It's relaxed. We can't be at ease without being relaxed. We can't really be open to what's arising in our senses without being relaxed. So if your mind is busy, relax and return to the resting, breathing body. If your mind is dull, then relax and return to the breathing, sensing body. When you have a little sense of resting in the breathing body, then open to sounds. We're still open and resting in the sensations of the breathing body, but we also hear sounds. Sensations are always there. Sounds are always coming and going. Question is, where is our mind? So we rest in physical sensations. We rest in sounds. We see shapes and colors. Breathing, body sensations, hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting. Of course, thoughts and emotions pop up, but don't pay any attention to them. In this first foundation of mindfulness, we're only paying attention to body sensations, hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting. Look at something in your visual field. Just look at an object in front of you. Where is that visual image? Is the visual image out there in the object? Or does it look like the image is in your eyes? Or is the image somewhere in between? Where's that experience of seeing something? So there's this everyday object out in front of you, and there's the scene. What is it that sees? What is it that's aware of that visual image? If your mind gets going on that question and tries to answer it, you can just disregard that too. Insight questions are meant to help us direct our awareness, right? We're not looking for an answer, an explanation. Like we could talk about rods and cones in the eyes. We could talk about visual images in the brain. We're looking for the experience. When you look at something in front of you, where is that visual image? As you look around the room you're in, those images, shapes, and colors, what experiences those? And whatever feelings of attraction or aversion, where do those come from? Is the pleasant or unpleasant feeling of something in the object? Is it a pleasant object? Unpleasant object? And where does that pleasant or unpleasant feeling arise? Where is that feeling? And just go back and forth between resting and sensations as they arise, body sensations, hearing, seeing. Just resting in those and noticing as they come and go. And then as a sensation, a sound or a sight comes up that is intense enough that it gives rise to a pleasant or unpleasant feeling, then just rest in the sensation and then the feeling. And look at them. Don't do anything with them, but look. Rest in them and look. Thoughts arise, of course, but you don't need them to rest and recognize sensations and feelings. The calm abiding is the resting aspect. We just rest in whatever arises. Whether it's sounds or sights or body sensations, whatever arises, we rest in that experience without doing anything with it, without changing it, without. Of course, pleasant and unpleasant feelings arise, but we don't do anything about those either. So calm abiding or resting meditation is kind of choiceless awareness. We're just there. And as we get dull or we get distracted, then we just keep coming back to what's already there and just resting in that experience. Vipashyana is looking at something. So a sensation of pain arises in my knee. I notice the aversion, the unpleasantness. And so I turn and I look at that sensation and I look at that feeling of unpleasantness. That looking, we call it looking, but again, not done with the eyes, just turning our attention to a particular intense sensation and the pleasant or unpleasant feeling that comes out of it. that looking can last maybe a minute or two before we start getting carried away by describing, or the pleasant or unpleasant feeling kind of takes over. And so at that point we stop looking, thinking about what is that sensation and what does it mean and why do I feel this. All of that is of no use. Like recognizing your friend. You look, you either recognize that face or you don't. But when you start thinking about it, then you go back to resting. There's a lot more resting than there is looking. And the ability to rest is the prerequisite or the foundation. It's the necessary base from which to look clearly at something. So the third foundation is the mind and all of its contents, thoughts, stories, mental images. Like if I say Eiffel Tower, some image comes to mind. If I say elephant, another image. That's a mental image, unless you have one right in front of you. So that's part of the mind. Memories, impulses, all of those things are mind and its contents. That's the third foundation, and we'll play with that one on Saturday. But no matter how complex your experience gets, the first foundations are the physical senses and those feeling sensations of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If you can keep returning to those, that will go a long ways toward keeping your mind from getting wrapped up in thoughts, memories, stories, emotional dramas. The Satipatthana Sutra, Four Foundations of Mindfulness Sutra, says if you can rest in your body for 7 days, you will become completely enlightened. So I don't know about that, but that's the, yeah. I do know that for me, and again, everybody's different, so sometimes classes are not so helpful. Once you get into this practice, it's very helpful to talk to a teacher directly about your individual experience. In a way, we all have the same experience, but in another way, each of us, how that experience unfolds and how we react to it is quite individual. But for me, the most reliable way to deal with the mind and its contents when they get racing around is to return to the body, the physical sensing of the body, including sight, sound, something that brings me back into my physical body and something that keeps me in the room, sights and sounds. And so I'm hoping, if you get nothing else, that you'll have a sense of what the first two foundations are, the physical senses and the pleasant, unpleasant feelings that come out of those, and how to rest and just rest in the recognizing of those. That's the actual method. So we have a few minutes. Have about 15 minutes if people have questions about, let's kind of maybe at first stick with the method. So like if this was it and you were going to go off and practice for a month, would you be would you be clear about how to start and how to kind of go through the practice? Not that this is the only way, but it's the Four Foundations of Mindfulness way, mixed in with a bit of Kagyu insight teaching. So if anybody has questions or clarifications around that, we have a few minutes, and I'm not sure I can see everybody's picture even, so if you have a question, just unmute and...
Yeah, George, this is a picture, so you probably can't see me. It's really dark here.
Hi.
I have a question about resting with the feeling of sleepiness, because that comes up for me a lot, and then resting with it just seems like it makes me fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And struggling with it doesn't seem like the right move.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that technique in terms of that.
Yeah. Well, anybody who meditates very long will encounter sleepiness. And whether it's a physical sleepiness or whether it's more of a mental kind of laziness, just like a dullness, you're kind of awake, but your awareness kind of shuts down, we can just lump all the physical and mental dullness. Sometimes it's called sloth and torpor. Sometimes it's called sleepiness. Sometimes it's called dullness. But we put all those basically into your energy is sinking. So assuming that you're not just exhausted and you need a good night's rest, the way you could work with it best, maybe, if you want to put qualities on it, best would be to recognize it. Rest in the feeling of sleepiness or dullness, but be alert enough to recognize it for what it is, the sinking, the shutting down of awareness. See if you can rest and recognize that experience. If you're actually disappearing mentally or physically and falling asleep, then it's not so popular in some groups, but I would say move. Your energy is sinking, so you want to stir up your energy. We might be able to do it by relaxing and resting and recognizing just with our awareness energy. But if that doesn't work, then change your position a little bit. Another option is to do something with your attention. So you could go back and reflect on the four thoughts that turn the mind for a couple minutes. Remember why you're practicing. Remember impermanence and opportunity, something like that. So you're giving up on the resting and recognizing practice, going back to a contemplative practice in order to rouse your energy.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are, of course, millions of meditators have dealt with dullness and sleepiness, and so there's, literally hundreds of antidotes. But from the standpoint of calm abiding, resting in experience, and clear seeing, recognizing the nature of that experience, the the heavy-handed application of antidotes is not the best. Right? We bring dullness into resting and recognizing. And the same thing if your mind is busy. If you're thinking, you can't stop thinking, you can't get out of an emotional drama. Can you bring that, the sensations and feelings of that, into awareness and rest and recognize in that experience as it comes and goes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, yeah.
Something that happens to me often, especially after a busy day, it kind of settles a little bit if I'm on retreat, is let's say I'm relaxing into the body, feeling itself, and then the mind contracts into looking. It's like the self pops up in the head, looks, and then I can bring a little bit of awareness, in a way, investigation, feeling the sensations in the head, it relaxes again. And if it's after a long day, it can be just like up and down, up and down, up and down experience. It's a little better if I include the visual field as well. It doesn't go that much, but then it kind of keeps part of the attention with the seeing all the time. So maybe if you can talk about what's the skillful way to work with this contraction of the self in the head, looking from the eyes.
Well, linking it to the previous question, you could say that this is rising energy. So sinking energy would be sloth, torpor, dullness, sleepiness, kind of zoning out. Rising energy would be thinking, trying, anything that brings the energy up into the body. So again, ideally, you could rest in recognizing the nature of the rising energy and the way the energy is going out the eyes. You could bring your awareness to your legs or to the weight of your body on the cushion. You could bring your awareness to the sensations of breathing in your belly. Or you could bring awareness to sounds. Close your eyes. Our eyes are so linked with our awareness. We're a pretty visual culture, right? We're on the computer, we're driving, we're looking at things. So sometimes difficult to kind of turn the eyes off. But when you're not listening for sounds, when you're not hearing the sounds around you, what are your ears doing? Sometimes to stop seeing things or to stop that energy, our awareness going out of our eyes into objects, we have to close our eyes. But we can't close our ears, right? The sounds are still there, but we're not hearing them. I think insight is not a good word for Vipassana, but it's actually the Sanskrit, Tibetan, all the Buddhist languages. It's sight, like eyes. But you could more, I think, maybe better to feel. Feel the objects in the room. Feel the sounds that come and go. There's another little thing we could do, everybody could do. Look at something across the room, a little distance from you, and then look at it really hard. Really focus your eyes, look at it. Try to pick out all the details. Just send your awareness out through your eyes and really focus on that object. Now, what do your eyes and your face feel like when you go out there to that object and try to grasp it with your eyes? And now just sit back and relax your eyes and your face and your mind and whatever's in your visual field without looking. Let it come to you. If your eyes clamp onto something and start to grasp that object, let go. Open to the whole visual field again. Let sights come to you. So we have the ability to focus on something. Look at a lamp or look at a window. It's like shining a flashlight. That's when the energy goes out and we kind of get tangled up with the object. We get stuck to the object. But we also have this global awareness, global visual awareness. We're not looking at anything, but everything comes to us. When we drive, we're focused on the road ahead of us, red light, green light, but we can also see things on the side. So if we can de-link our eyes from our awareness, some people are all keyed into ears, right? Any little sound, their attention just goes and they're trying to grasp that sound. Busyness and dullness. There are many obstacles. There's lists of 20 obstacles to awareness, stable awareness, but they can all be lumped under busyness and dullness. If your awareness and some particular part of it, like eyesight, is too intense, then relax. Settle back down and just relax. I will try not to use look at this sensation, look at this thought, look at this feeling. Maybe, not sure what word would be better, but what we're trying to do is recognize what's already there. So in a way, we don't need to go looking or finding something. It's not hidden. What we're looking for is right in front of us. And if we rest in experience, everything will come to us. With dullness, we might not be trying hard enough to arouse our intention and our awareness and open to experience. With busyness, we might be trying too hard. And that's just as bad, or just as futile. Any other questions in the last couple minutes? We can, of course, take things up again on Saturday. Fred?
Yeah, hi. Are you going to be doing any Qigong on Saturday?
Well, I'm sure going to do some during the breaks because I find it difficult to sit for many hours. Yeah, I think maybe we could work some in awareness of the body in motion. Actually a good way to help us then sit and rest. So we won't do a lot because it's 10 to 5, sounds like a long time, but actually not. So we'll focus on the resting and recognizing practice. But the first foundation of mindfulness, hard to be aware and rest in thoughts and emotions if you can't rest in the body. Very difficult.
Another question, Lexi, maybe you could answer. What's the temperature like in the temple? Do we need to wear a little sweater, or is it going to be hot, or what?
It's air conditioned, so it's the usual bring something if you feel cold.
Okay.
You know, I can't say quite specifically, but I noticed on Monday that some people had a little shawl or sweater, you know, and some people thought it was just fine. Some people thought it was a little cold. So layer up.
Thank you.
At 100 degrees, cold sounds pretty nice, actually. Let us remember again while we're practicing, why we are practicing. And if you can look in the chat, that link to the refuge and dedication prayer should still be in there. And if you can find those prayers online, you could join in, but otherwise I will just recite them. By this merit may I obtain omniscience. May the enemy wrong action be overcome. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, may I quickly free all beings from the ocean of samsara. By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and bring every sentient being without exception to that state. Bodhicitta, awakening mind, is precious. May it arise in whom it has not arisen. Once arisen, may it not diminish, but ever grow and flourish. Thank you, everyone, for practicing with me tonight. And I hope to see you on Saturday. If you can make it to the temple, that would be great. The practice and teaching is facilitated by being together in physical space, but I know that's not possible for everybody, so join in by Zoom if you can't be there in person. Bring a lunch if you're going to come Saturday. We will take a break, but it'd be nice to spend it with others and not to be racing around looking for food around town. So just bring something to eat, and if you got a little something extra, you could bring that too and share it. So I will see you on Saturday. Thank you, everyone. May our practice and activities be of benefit to all beings.
Thank you, George.
You're welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Take care.
Uh,